He was small by Hollywood standards, just 5'7", 135 pounds, at a time when movie heroes were tall, broad-shouldered giants. Bruce Lee looked almost ordinary, but the moment he moved, that illusion shattered. His body seemed to vibrate with energy. His fists blurred faster than the eye could track, and his kicks cracked through the air like thunder. Audiences, opponents, and even scientists asked the same question. How was this possible? How could such a man generate speed and power that defied belief? The stories of Bruce's abilities often sound exaggerated till you realize most of them were witnessed, recorded, or even filmed. There was his legendary 1-inch punch, where he placed his fist just an inch from a man's chest and, with the tiniest twitch of motion, blasted him backward into a chair. There were his demonstrations on film sets, where his kicks were so fast that cameras couldn't capture them properly. Directors begged him to slow down so audiences could at least see the strikes on screen. And there were his feats of strength. One-arm pull-ups performed like a casual warm-up. Push-ups balanced on just 2 fingers, holding his body out straight like a human flag. To those who saw these displays, Bruce looked more than human. He looked like a being from another world. But here's the secret. Bruce Lee was not born superhuman. He built himself that way. He hacked into his own biology decades before modern sports science existed. He studied physics, nutrition, psychology, and philosophy, and he merged them all into a training system that turned his body into a living weapon. Let's go back to that 1-inch punch, because it tells us a lot about how Bruce thought. On the surface, it looks like a trick. How can you hit hard without winding up? But science explains it. Bruce wasn't just punching with his arm. He was using his whole body. His feet pressed into the ground, his legs pushed upward, his hips rotated, his core twisted, and all of that energy funneled into his fist. It's called the kinetic chain, the same principle that lets a baseball pitcher throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. The difference is that Bruce compressed the entire chain into a single inch. Most people waste energy when they move. They tense up too early, they swing inefficiently, or they misalign their joints. Bruce trained to eliminate every leak. He stayed relaxed until the very last fraction of a second, then snapped his body like a whip. That's why the impact felt like a sledgehammer despite the tiny distance. It wasn't magic. It was science, perfected through obsession. And then there was his speed. 6 punches in a single second. A kick that blurred past the camera lens. A hand so fast he could snatch a coin from your palm before your fingers closed. How? The answer lies in the nervous system. The average human takes about 0.2 of a second to react to visual information. That's fast in daily life, but in combat it's slow. Bruce trained until his reactions bypassed conscious thought. His movements became automatic, wired directly into his nerves. Neuromuscular efficiency, scientists call it the ability of the brain to send signals to muscles with lightning speed. Bruce pushed it to levels few had ever seen. He also trained his eyes. Most fighters focus on hands or feet. Bruce watched the shoulders and hips, the tiny twitches that reveal intention before movement even begins. He could strike before his opponent finished deciding to attack. Sparring partners often said the same thing. Fighting Bruce felt unfair, like he was always 3 steps ahead. What set Bruce apart wasn't just his training, it was his philosophy. In an era when martial arts were full of rigid traditions, Bruce broke free. He created Jeet Kune, the way of the intercepting fist. It wasn't a style, but an anti-style, a philosophy of freedom and adaptability. He said, absorb what is useful, discard what is not, add what is uniquely your own. And that philosophy extended to his body. He absorbed the best of weightlifting, boxing, sprinting, gymnastics. He discarded outdated methods that slowed him down. He added his own experiments, from isometrics to plyometrics, from protein shakes to meditation. His body was not built by chance. It was designed like a machine, fine-tuned for efficiency, and behind that machine was discipline bordering on obsession. Bruce didn't train a few hours a week. He trained every day, often from dawn till late night, running, lifting, sparring, stretching, meditating, studying. His journals show meticulous records of routines, nutrition notes, even philosophical reflections. He treated his body and mind as one project, a project to push human potential to its edge. So here's the question: was Bruce Lee really superhuman? Or was he proof that the limits of the human body are far beyond what we imagine? If it's the first, then he was one of a kind. But if it's the second, then his secrets can be studied, learned, and applied, not just in martial arts, but in any field that demands performance. This is why Bruce Lee's story continues to fascinate. He wasn't a comic book character. He was real. He didn't rely on fantasy. He relied on science, creativity, and relentless discipline. He built himself into something the world had never seen before. And that's why, decades after his death, people still look at his feats and wonder, how did he do it? Stay with me, because this is only the beginning. We've scratched the surface with his demonstrations and philosophy. In the next chapter, we dive deeper into the science behind his power, the biomechanics, the physics, the biology. We'll uncover what really made Bruce Lee's body look superhuman, and what lessons we can learn from him today. To understand Bruce Lee's power, we need to break down the science of strength. Most people assume power comes from muscle size. Big muscles mean big strength, right? Not necessarily. Strength is the ability to produce force, but power is the ability to produce force quickly. And Bruce Lee understood this distinction better than almost anyone. Unlike bodybuilders of his era, Bruce never trained for bulk. He didn't want to carry extra weight that would slow him down. Instead, he trained for functional strengths, strengths that could be applied instantly in combat. He wanted to maximize his body's efficiency. Every ounce of muscle, every tendon, every fiber had a purpose. At the core of Bruce's power was his focus on fast-twitch muscle fibers. Human muscles are made of two main types: slow-twitch fibers, built for endurance, and fast-twitch fibers, built for speed and explosiveness. A marathon runner relies on slow-twitch fibers, while a sprinter explodes with fast-twitch. Bruce trained specifically to activate and strengthen his fast-twitch fibers. That's why he could move so explosively, why his strikes carried such shocking force, and why he could unleash 6 punches in a single second. But muscles alone weren't enough. Bruce also trained his tendons and connective tissue, which most athletes ignore even today. Tendons are like biological springs. The stronger and stiffer they are, the more force they can store and release. By doing isometric exercises, holding muscles under tension without moving, Bruce built tendon strength that allowed him to perform extraordinary feats, like fingertip push-ups and one-arm pull-ups. His tendons turned his body into a coiled spring, ready to explode with power at any moment. Then there was his core. Bruce understood that true power doesn't come from the arms or legs alone. It comes from the torso, from rotational force. Think of a baseball hitter swinging a bat or a boxer throwing a hook. The power comes from the hips and core. Bruce trained his midsection relentlessly. carving out ABS that looked like armor plating, not for aesthetics, but for function. He performed dragon flags, hanging leg raises, twisting sit-ups, and side bends until his core was an engine of torque. That's why his kicks and punches carried such devastating impact. His entire body rotated as one unit, delivering force like a wrecking ball. Another key element was his use of isometrics. At a time when most athletes focused on lifting heavy weights through big movements, Bruce incorporated static holds into his training. For example, he would push against an immovable object with maximum effort, training his muscles and nervous system to fire together. Studies today show that isometrics build incredible neural strength, the ability to recruit more muscle fibers instantly. Bruce may not have had modern research, but through experimentation, he discovered the benefits himself. And then there was his explosive plyometric work. Bruce practiced jumping kicks, bounding drills, and spring-like movements that trained his body to unleash force quickly. This combination strength from isometrics, explosiveness from plyometrics, and refinement from martial arts practice gave him a unique blend of abilities. He wasn't the strongest man in the world. He wasn't the fastest, but he was among the most explosive, pound for pound. Let's put this in perspective. Reports say Bruce could send a 200-pound man flying backward with a sidekick. To generate that much force, he had to transfer enormous power through his legs, hips, and core. Scientists estimate that the sidekick could generate over 700 pounds of force, comparable to the striking force of elite heavyweight boxers, despite Bruce's much smaller frame. That's efficiency. That's biomechanics at its peak. Bruce also had extraordinary relative strength compared to his body weight. This is why his feats looked so impressive. A man his size performing one-arm pull-ups isn't just strong. He's extraordinarily strong relative to his weight. Relative strength is what gymnasts display when they hold iron crosses or planches. And Bruce trained himself to achieve similar control. He combined calisthenics with weights, always balancing strength with mobility. Speaking of mobility, Bruce placed huge emphasis on flexibility. Many athletes chase strength at the cost of mobility, but Bruce knew that flexibility increased his striking range and reduced injury risk. He stretched daily, incorporating dynamic and static movements. This allowed him to kick higher, move faster, and recover quicker. Flexibility wasn't an afterthought, it was part of his power. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Bruce's power was how he integrated scientific curiosity into training. He read books on kinesiology, studied anatomy charts, and took notes on muscle function. He treated his body like a laboratory, constantly testing and refining. When he felt a method didn't improve efficiency, he discarded it. When he found something useful, he drilled it until it became second nature. This open-minded experimental approach set him apart from fighters who blindly followed tradition and power. For Bruce wasn't just physical, it was psychological. He believed the mind directed the body. Through meditation and mental training, he learned to control tension, focus, and intent. When he struck, it wasn't just muscle and bone, it was willpower channeled through movement. He often said, "As you think, so shall you become." For him, power was not just about force. It was about clarity of intention. This holistic approach, muscle fibers, tendons, core strength, isometrics, plyometrics, flexibility, and psychology created the illusion of superhuman power. But in truth, it was simply Bruce Lee mastering the science of his own body. He wasn't bigger than others, but he was smarter, more efficient, and more relentless. So when you see the footage of Bruce sending men flying with a single kick, or blasting someone backward with a 1-inch punch, remember, it wasn't magic. It was biology, physics, and relentless practice. He took the building blocks of human power and assembled them into something extraordinary. And in the next part, we'll explore another side of Bruce that made him seem superhuman, his incredible speed. Because strength and power are only half the story. The other half is how fast you can use them. And in that domain, Bruce Lee was unmatched. When people talk about Bruce Lee, one word almost always comes first: speed. His strikes weren't just fast, they were shockingly fast. So fast, in fact, that standard movie cameras struggled to capture them. Directors of his films often had to ask him to slow down, because otherwise the punches and kicks blurred into invisibility. Imagine that, a man so fast that cinema itself couldn't keep up. But what gave Bruce Lee this extraordinary speed? Was it genetics, training, or some deeper secret? To answer, we have to break down speed into its components. Because speed is not just about moving quickly, it's about perception, reaction, and execution. First, there's reaction time. The average human takes around 0.25 seconds to react to a visual stimulus. That means if someone throws a punch, it takes about 1/4 of a second for the brain to see it, process it, and tell the body to respond. But Bruce trained himself to cut that time dramatically. Through endless sparring and drills, he wired his nervous system to bypass conscious thought. His reactions became automatic, what scientists call reflex arcs. Instead of the brain slowly analyzing information, Bruce trained his body to respond instantly, almost like a coiled spring releasing without hesitation. Then comes movement speed, how quickly you can actually perform the action once your brain decides to move. Bruce optimized every detail here. He eliminated unnecessary motion, reducing wasted energy. Watch footage of his strikes, and you'll notice something fascinating. There's no telegraphing, no big wind-up, no dramatic shoulder movement to warn the opponent. He stayed relaxed until the very last instant, then exploded with precision. This ability to remain loose, then snap into action, is one of the great secrets of speed. Muscles that stay tense are slow. Muscles that relax, then fire explosively, are fast. Bruce understood this intuitively. Another crucial element was economy of motion. Most fighters make large movements, swinging wide or pulling back before they strike. Bruce eliminated these wasted steps. He said, "The less effort, the faster and more powerful you will be." His punches traveled in straight lines, the shortest distance between 2 points. His kicks snapped directly to the target, not looping around in wide arcs. By reducing travel time, he reduced the window for his opponent to react. And then, of course, there was raw neuromuscular efficiency. Bruce trained his nervous system to fire his muscles at maximum speed. Remember those fast twitch muscle fibers we discussed earlier? He trained them obsessively with speed drills, shadowboxing, and explosive movements. His muscles weren't just strong, they were trained to activate instantly. Perhaps the most legendary demonstration of his speed was the coin trick. Bruce would place a coin in someone's palm, tell them to close their hand as soon as they felt him move, and before they could even shut their fingers, he would snatch the coin and replace it with another one. Their hand would close, but around the second coin. That level of speed seems unreal, but it was documented again and again. Sparring partners described similar experiences. They said Bruce hit them before they even realized he had moved. Some said it felt like he could read their minds, because the moment they thought about striking, Bruce was already countering. The truth is simpler. Bruce trained himself to read the tiniest signals, the shift of a shoulder, the twitch of a hip band, react before the attack was fully launched. This is called anticipatory reflex. Elite athletes in many sports use it, from baseball players reading a pitcher's motion to tennis players predicting a serve. Bruce brought it into martial arts with devastating effect. But speed wasn't just physical for Bruce. It was also mental clarity. He believed in the idea of being like water, flowing, formless, adaptable. When the mind is cluttered, hesitation slows you down. But when the mind is clear, action flows instantly. Bruce practiced meditation and mindfulness to sharpen this ability. His philosophy wasn't separate from his speed, was part of it. Calm mind, explosive body. Let's also not forget the role of conditioning. Speed requires stamina. You can't be fast if you're fatigued. Bruce trained with intense cardio running, skipping rope, shadowboxing for long rounds, so that when others slowed down, he stayed sharp. His body could sustain high-speed bursts again and again without losing efficiency. In combat terms, speed creates an illusion of superhuman power. If you hit someone faster than they expect, they can't brace, can't defend, can't roll with the strike. The impact feels heavier because it catches them completely unprepared. This is one reason Bruce's blows seemed to send men flying. They weren't just powerful, they were impossibly fast. Modern science even backs this up. Studies show that striking speed is one of the biggest multipliers of force. A moderately strong punch delivered with blazing speed can do more damage than a slow punch from a much larger person. Bruce embodied this principle. He wasn't the biggest fighter, but he was often the fastest. And that made all the difference. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Bruce's speed wasn't only physical, and it wasn't only mental, it was strategic. He developed a system called the stop hit, or intercepting fist. Instead of waiting to defend against an opponent's strike, he attacked at the exact moment they began their move. Imagine two cars heading toward each other. If one launches before the other has even shifted gears, the race is already over. Bruce's philosophy of Jeet Kune Do was built around this idea: strike not after, not during, but before the opponent fully moves. This strategy made his speed seem godlike. So when we see Bruce Lee on film, his hand moving in a blur, or when we hear stories of him intercepting punches mid-flight, we're witnessing the perfect combination of science and philosophy. He trained his body to move fast, his mind to remain clear, and his strategy to anticipate. All of these layers stacked together to create the illusion of inhuman speed. But as with his power, the truth is more inspiring. He was human. He simply unlocked potential that most people never tap into. Bruce Lee once said, "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times." His speed wasn't the product of a few tricks. It was the product of endless repetition, refinement, and mastery. By drilling fundamentals until they became instinct, he made speed his second nature. So the next time you watch footage of Bruce Lee striking faster than the eye can follow, remember, it's not just about being quick. It's about preparation, efficiency, relaxation, anticipation, and clarity. That is the science of speed, and Bruce Lee mastered it. And in the next part, we'll look at something equally fascinating: his endurance and conditioning. Because speed and power mean little if you can't sustain them. And Bruce Lee trained his body to go the distance. Power and speed can dazzle the eye, but without endurance, they burn out quickly. Many fighters look explosive for the first minute, only to fade as fatigue sets in. Muscles fill with lactic acid, lungs gasp for oxygen, the body slows down, and the mind begins to panic. But Bruce Lee seemed tireless. His movements stayed sharp long after others wore out. His stamina wasn't just impressive, it was frightening. So how did he build this superhuman conditioning? First, we need to understand that endurance is more than just running long distances. It has multiple layers: cardiovascular endurance, heart and lungs; muscular endurance, ability of muscles to perform repeated contractions; and mental endurance, the will to push through fatigue. Bruce trained all three with ruthless efficiency. Every morning, Bruce ran. Not casually, but intensely. He covered 4 to 5 miles a day, mixing steady pacing with sprints. Today we call this interval training, bursts of high intensity followed by recovery periods. In the 1960s, it wasn't common in martial arts training. But Bruce experimented, discovered its value, and made it a core part of his routine. This built a cardiovascular engine that allowed his body to pump oxygen more efficiently. His lungs and heart were trained for combat, not just for show. Running alone wasn't enough. Bruce added cycling, jump rope, and sparring drills that pushed his cardiovascular system in different ways. He wanted his body to handle short bursts of explosive energy, like a flurry of punches, as well as long stretches of activity, like a drawn-out fight scene on camera. His conditioning was versatile because combat itself is unpredictable for muscular endurance. Bruce relied on high-rep calisthenics, push-ups, sit-ups, squats, pull-ups. But he didn't just perform them casually. He layered them with variations: fingertip push-ups to strengthen grip, one-arm push-ups for stability, dragon flags for core resilience. Each movement trained not only the muscles, but also the supporting structures, joints, ligaments, tendons. This allowed his body to resist fatigue where others might fail. And then there was his core. We've mentioned it before, but in conditioning, it deserves its own spotlight. Bruce believed the core was the foundation of stamina. If your midsection collapses, your strikes weaken, your movement slows, and your breathing suffers. That's why he hammered his abs with hundreds of repetitions daily. His stomach became a shield, not just for impact, but for performance. Breathing was another secret weapon. Bruce studied not only martial arts breathing techniques, but also yogic practices. He believed breath controlled energy, stamina, and even emotion. By mastering deep diaphragmatic breathing, he delayed fatigue, kept his mind calm under pressure, and maintained explosive bursts without losing rhythm. This was part of his philosophy of being like water, breath flowing as naturally as movement, and conditioning wasn't only physical. Bruce's mental endurance was legendary. Imagine repeating drills thousands of times, running miles daily, lifting weights, sparring, then studying philosophy late into the night. That required not just a strong body, but an iron will. Bruce pushed through boredom, fatigue, and pain. He cultivated discipline so powerful that training became a way of life, not a chore. But perhaps the most overlooked part of his endurance was recovery. Bruce understood that the body grows not only in exertion, but in rest. He slept deeply, practiced relaxation, and even incorporated meditation as a form of recovery. Unlike many athletes who push until they break, Bruce treated his body as a delicate balance of stress and renewal. He wanted his performance sustainable, not self-destructive. Modern science tells us endurance depends heavily on max the maximum rate at which the body can use oxygen. Elite endurance athletes have VO2 max levels around 70 to 80, though we don't have Bruce's exact data. His training suggests he would have scored extraordinarily high. His daily running, cycling, and fight drills made his cardiovascular system as efficient as his muscular system. Sparring partners often noted that Bruce didn't seem to get tired. While they gasped for breath, Bruce pressed forward with relentless energy. In fight choreography, where long takes required repeated exertion, Bruce stayed razor sharp. His ability to recover between bursts was so fast it looked unnatural. Let's break it down scientifically. When muscles work, they burn fuel, glycogen, and produce waste lactic acid. Fatigue happens when glycogen runs out or lactic acid builds too fast. Bruce trained his body to buffer that acid and to store more glycogen through diet and conditioning. This allowed him to sustain effort longer than most people his size. And speaking of diet, Bruce's nutrition supported his endurance. He avoided refined foods, favored lean proteins, vegetables, rice, and drank protein shakes. He consumed small, frequent meals to keep his metabolism steady. For Bruce, food was fuel, not indulgence. He treated his diet as seriously as his training. Because he knew endurance depended on energy management. Now combine all this calisthenics, breathing, recovery, nutrition, and you get a body designed to sustain peak output far beyond the average. This is why Bruce could spar for hours, why he could film fight scenes that demanded dozens of takes, why he could perform strength feats after intense cardio. He wasn't just powerful and fast. He was tireless. But the deepest layer of endurance was philosophical. Bruce believed that fatigue begins in the mind. The body often has more to give, but the mind quits first. Through meditation, philosophy, and sheer willpower, Bruce rewired his relationship with fatigue. To him, exhaustion was just another barrier to flow. He once said, "Do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one." That was his mindset, not avoiding struggle, but embracing it. This mindset made him not just a martial artist, but a warrior of endurance. His body could push, but his mind could push further. Together, they created a synergy that felt superhuman. So when we look at Bruce Lee's conditioning, we see more than exercise routines. We see a system: cardiovascular training, muscular endurance, breathing control, recovery, nutrition, and philosophy, all woven into one relentless lifestyle. That's why he could move with the energy of someone twice his size, for twice as long. And in the next part, we'll explore the final piece of the puzzle, Bruce Lee's mind. Because his body was extraordinary, but his mindset, focus, and philosophy might be the most superhuman element of all.